All right, how about that title? I actually came up with the title without looking up what the word dogma meant. And last night I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's not quite what I meant. But after attending this conference for a couple of days, maybe it's about right, because dogma is a principle or set of principles set by an authority as incontrovertibly true, right? It defines a paradigm. And if you don't believe in those principles, then you have to sort of throw out the paradigm. And we talk a lot in ecological economics about our paradigm, right? And how everything that we do emanates from a paradigm, from what Herman Daly called a pre-analytic vision. So the dogma of ecological economics, right? Maybe that's what, but I was thinking it more in a more pejorative sense. And it turns out that I meant dogmatic. Dogmatic, right? So a dogmatic belief system, a dogmatic is often used disparagingly to refer to a belief that is held on stubbornly. And I was writing this abstract and thinking about this conference kind of in the terms of has our paradigm shifted in ecological economics in a way that has been unproductive, unsatisfying, and is leading us on a path that that's closer to what we criticize. So we can use this both ways. Let's try that as dogma or dogmatic and see where things land. Peter and colleagues are working on a book called The Unfinished Journey of Ecological Economics, and I think I mean it in that sense, right? We set out on this path, we set a clear paradigm, and I'm not sure that we've followed those principles. I'm not sure that we've created a vision for economics that's built from an understanding of the planet working inwards, but rather we've built a vision of the economics for an understanding of the economy as it is working outwards. So that's where I want to start. We've been at this conference for 2.5 days now. I think it's time for an exercise. You guys with me? All right, so you need to stand up, tuck your seats in, make sure there's nothing in, this is sort of like getting ready to fly. Make sure there's nothing in front of your feet. Everything's tucked under, because you're going to move. All right? You want to participate? Okay, so this is an exercise called Where Do You Stand? I'm going to say some statements, and you are either going to agree or disagree with those statements by voting with your feet. Okay? So if you strongly disagree, you're on this side of the room. Strongly agree, neutral, you can kind of hang out here in the middle, okay? You can pass each other. We'll do a quick vote with your feet. Ready? So let's explore our dogma. Economic growth and environmental protection are fundamentally in conflict with one another. Agree, disagree, neutral? Economic growth and environmental protection are fundamentally in conflict with one another.
It says economic growth per se or
I've written these words in a way that you have to define what they mean, right? I carefully chose fundamentally. All right, interesting. So, fundamentally in conflict with one another. So, more people on the strongly agree to agree side, some in the middle, some looking for more clarity perhaps before they vote. Let me hear a 30-second explanation for why you agree with this statement. Someone on this side. 30 seconds, elevator speech. One floor.
Because of economic growth, without more carbon being produced.
Okay, so we heard from Brian Check last night. Economic growth is a physical measure, right? As the economy grows, it doesn't grow into the void. How about here on this side? Why do you disagree with this statement? Help me out, anybody?
All kinds of economic growth, and some of it does benefit the environment.
Okay, so if growth is measured in the aggregate, right, would you be over on this side? But different kinds of growth would result in shrinking things elsewhere, so there's this kind of balancing act. So, I mean, this is a struggle that we have in this community with a fundamental paradigm, which I'll get to in a minute. In the middle, I'm just going to assume you all are looking for more clarity. You don't know what fundamental means. You want to define growth your own way. Growth is more like development. I know all of these arguments. I do this with my students all the time. To a certain point, though, exactly. So there's also the notion of timing and transition. And how about this one? This one's fun. There should be no limit. There should be no limit to the amount of money that an individual can earn in today's society? Strongly disagree? Strongly agree? Wow, welcome to Canada. I don't quite get this distribution in the States. Man, there should be no limit. So more people are on the disagree side. Let's start with on this side. Why do you agree? Or you're somewhat ambivalent?
I guess I agree because if they're offering goods and services that we really want and it can help, it also can help the environment as well, why shouldn't we be able to make a lot of money and then reinvest it?
Yeah, people paying for what you're making and you're part of this economy, then, you know, why shouldn't you be rewarded? How about towards this side? Yes?
Well, money, the whole power corrupts, however that statement is. You're completely removed from the rest of society. Like, it's just detrimental, I think. So. Okay,
so there's a notion of sort of a width between the poorest and the richest in society, and that's it.
You start getting into like trying to influence politics and policy, and like it's dangerous.
Yes.
The rich are rich because they think they're the best in society. They've done the best, so they have the most insight for society to necessarily.
So you guys you don't assume that we all start from, we're born and we all have equal opportunities and everything's just laid out in front of us. The American dream, white picket fence, dog in the yard. No, you don't buy that? All right, let's try this one. Free markets will ultimately solve our environmental problems. Wow.
What do you call free?
Ah. God, I don't know. A lot of the solutions I hear in ecological economics. Free markets will ultimately solve. Okay, so there's some people hanging out in the middle here. How come? Oh, you can't get over anymore. Sorry. Are there some people who want to climb that wall and really get on the... Okay.
This was a ship, we'd be capsized.
Okay. Are there folks in the middle that want to hang on to free market as our sort of principal way of solving problems? Part of the solution, okay. So I chose my words carefully. Ultimately we'll solve, but you're like hedging your bet a little bit. You're like, wait a minute, we just can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We gotta, okay, yeah?
And that's where you draw your boundaries around your market. What you cost within your market, what you don't cost within your market.
Okay.
It influence a lot about whether it can solve environmental problems or whether it hinder environment.
So there's a narrative in ecological economics that markets are appropriate in some contexts, they need to be well regulated in others, and in other contexts they just don't work.
And then give the boundaries of how your market is defined.
Okay, okay. Yes, in the back?
The market has really driven the viability of solar, for example.
Okay, so market incentives, the incentive to make money as well, which relates to the other one, sort of drives the viability of new alternatives, entrepreneurship, etc.
I have this question about whether the opposite is true. In socialist countries, they also assumed that they could solve the environmental problem through administrative prices and social systems, and it didn't work. So it doesn't work either for the free market or the opposite with the socialist.
Okay, so you guys are starting to steal my talk, so let's, now it's time to sit. So grab your seats. It's just to kind of get you thinking here. We've got 10 minutes. So we do have this, you know, when you Google ecological economics, you do look for a Google image, you get these images of the whole nested systems idea, right? You get these images of the economy as a subsystem of the environmental system. Peter's talk the other day, this new vision that extends from cosmology, from the Big Bang to the Anthropocene, right? We are one species of many. This is kind of our rhetoric in ecological economics, right? And this is sort of this pre-analytic vision. That at the very least, ecological economics asked us to put the system called the economy inside the containing and sustaining system called the ecosystem, right? And I'm somewhat disenchanted that we continue to sort of think that we can grow, or we can greenly grow, or we can efficiently grow, yet we know that every kind of form of growth that we can think of. And this whole dematerialization hypothesis has been refuted time and time again if you draw the boundary big enough and realize that we're dematerializing because we're importing energy and intensive stuff from elsewhere. So this sort of notion, this pre-analytic vision of the box inside the circle is such a simple starting point in ecological economics, and so much of what we do and talk about refutes this. So we have to keep, and I thought Brian's talk was really good last night about just trying to be very clear on our language of what do we mean by growth. And of course we talk about measuring it differently, moving from GDP to GPI, moving from growth to development, but we never quite seem to get out of the mindset that we can grow our way out of problems. The other piece about limits on money, limits on resources, limits to access to things. How do we share in the benefits and burdens of an economy, whether it's growing or not? Fundamentally, if you don't believe in an economy that can infinitely grow into the void, then there must be some piece of the ecological economics dogma, the principles that we sort of build our discipline upon, that agrees in limits of the distributions of the benefits and burdens, right? And so an economy that can grow forever kind of can ignore distribution because the pie's getting bigger and bigger, and so who cares about the share of the pie? And then we can avoid these really difficult conversations with each other around fairness and justice, and right? We'll just grow our way out of distribution problems. But I think this pre-analytic vision forces us to question how big should that gap be? What is fair? What is just? Who has access to the benefits and burdens of the current system that we live in? And then finally, that piece about the free market will ultimately solve our problems. You all immediately, or a lot of you, jump to this side of the room saying, well, maybe it's part of the solution, but I don't know that it's ultimately part of the solution. Yet we tend to, as a society, the Canadian society, the US society, for sure the US society, gravitates to sort of using the current system, tweaking the current system, manhandling the current system in a way that can get us to sort of a future that will continue to keep us on the growth path. This pre-analytic vision is really powerful. It's a starting point for any ecological economics course, textbook, or degree of study, which was what we want to talk about. So it implies, okay, and this is very sort of Daly-esque, right? It implies this first where do you stand exercise implies a sustainable scale, implies a question of how big should the economy be inside the containing and sustaining ecosystem. It implies a conversation that's driven by science, by biophysical limits, by biophysical realities. If we don't stand for that in ecological economics, what do we stand for? I posed that question. This next one implies a conversation about just distribution, a second principle, okay? And just distribution is often cast as a second principle because if we don't get the first one right, who cares about the benefits and burdens of the system? We got to have a sustainable system that will thrive and survive and that will move forward. And then finally, this last piece implies questioning efficiency. It implies asking those questions about markets. Where are markets realistic allocators of goods and services? Where do they have a shot? For example, when goods are rival and excludable and have very low externalities. Where do they just don't work unless they're well regulated, right? To sort of create those rival and excludable characteristics. And where are markets just the wrong institution, like it or not? And a lot of our conversations around how to make markets more efficient, how to make markets better, how to make markets achieve that green economy growth has been a lot of one step forward, two step back. Another activity. You don't have to stand up for this one. Students, how many students in the room? See a show of hands. Nice, okay. Pop quiz, you ready? Everyone's going to participate in this. Pop quiz. Most of you have been at the conference for the last few days? Any of you new to ecological economics? Oh, quite a few. Great, fantastic. Okay, so let's see how you're doing. Ready? Ecological economies. What would an ecological economy look like if we built one? A, it would focus on short-term profits with the goal of squandering resources as fast as possible. Or B, long-term value with the goal of sustaining people and planet. A or B? A? B? All right. We'll grade, write this on a piece of paper. We'll grade you afterwards, okay? Would rely on making products that are unreliable, fall apart, need to be replaced as fast as they are made. A? Or B? Rely on making products that are reliable, durable, and sustain value over the long run. A? B? Wow, these guys are pretty smart. Would depend on squeezing every last waking hour out of labor. Work people until they are tired, sick, demoralized, and need to be replaced often. A? B? Depend on a healthy balance between work, family, community, and leisure, and committed to the mental and physical health of colleagues and their families. B? Man, you guys are too easy. How about this one? Deplete non-renewable resources and externalize costs on distant people and distant lands and distant future. Why can you guys agree on this, but you can't agree on the pre-analytic vision? I don't understand. I'm just blown away. All right, so, and then ecological economists substitute renewable for non-renewable resources and internalize the full cost of economic activity. You know, we talk about that a lot as a society, for sure. And last one. Rapidly deplete natural resources, spoil our land, water, and air, maximize consumption above all else, and erode family, community, and personal health. Kind of a master plan A. Or plan B, transition to renewables, pollute within biophysical limits, can't get rid of pollution, create widely shared and broadly defined well-being, and invest in strong family. A or B? B? Anybody for A? Then why don't you believe the pre-analytic vision? I don't understand. Okay, okay. Hallmarks. So let me put this in real concrete terms. Let's see who likes column A or column B now. And this is from John Talbert, who's one of the co-creators of the Genuine Progress Indicator. Hallmarks of the prevailing economic model. Privatization, specialization, globalization, consumerism, centralization, fiscal austerity, urbanization, substituting technology for nature, market supremacy, competition, maximizing throughput, planned obsolescence, financial wealth, focus on financial wealth, and depleting capital. Now, there are a lot of elements in there that I think we agree with, and we want to use in moderation, or we want to adjust or tweak. If you really buy into the pre-analytic vision, we're talking about a shift to a new kind of an economy. And I don't know if the current economy is repairable for what we're talking about. We're really talking about a new basis for generating well-being in society. One that focuses, and you hear about this at a meeting like this, of course. The whole meeting has been framed around the commons, public commons, diversification, local self-reliance, frugality, subsidiarity. The scale of the problem should match the scale of the response. Fiscal responsibility, we heard about that in the last session. Rural revitalization, mimicking nature as our technology. Informal, focus more on the informal sector. Cooperation, really looking to the cooperative side of human nature for solutions. Resource efficiency for sure, but also durability, well-being, and building capital. Revitalizing our society, investing in ecological restoration. So, who's more on the left side? I should have put left, right. I should have switched these around. Who's more on the left? Who's more on the right? So, I mean, these are some of the strategies, right, that we think about that I think emanate from a worldview of ecological economics. We can agree on a lot of these strategies. We can agree on a lot of what we'd like to see, you know, 5, 10, 20 years from now. But we have a really hard time with stepping out from that paradigm, our own dogma. So what's the holdup? 2 minutes, okay. Last 2 slides. Sustainable scale. I think the hang-up is, you know, should scale, should the size of the economy be determined by science or by preferences? And I think when we lead with economics, we lead with determining the scale of the economy by preferences. Very ill-formed, ill-conceived preferences that very often aren't informed by science. This is a challenge for our field and many others. Policies that tend to be scale determined or determining. So what I mean by this is we set a price on something, for example, and we let all of these so-called rational agents go out in the marketplace and vote with their dollars, and then we see what the scale of the problem will be in the end. Or do we set scale, right, and let the scale determine the outcome? Scientists as passive or active, and we heard about this a little bit from the last session and sessions before, that scientists are going to have to take on more of a role in actively advocating for a new system. I don't think we can avoid this. We are the experts. We are the knowledges. We have the privilege and the responsibilities, especially in academia, to move forward to the new system. We no longer can afford to sit on our hands, write our peer-reviewed journals, and just sort of passively give people information. Just distribution, you know, calls for a question of working within power structures or taking back power. And I think you see a lot of the alignment with ecological economics, at least its principles, with the new economy movement, with the Occupy Wall Street movement, with a lot of the grassroots movements that we're seeing, which are about fundamentally power structures. Policies as rights or obligations. I think we're very comfortable with thinking about the rights of companies and the grandfathering in of those rights versus really flipping things around their head and thinking about obligations. I think a lot of what Peter Brown's talking about is redefining what is obligation, and from that a redefinition of governance, of law, of the whole system. People as consumers or citizens. I think this is a very important question that sits squarely within just distribution. A lot of the things we talk about in ecological economics are simply trying to incentivize consumers to make different choices versus rethinking people as citizens, ecological citizens, citizens of the planet. And finally, efficient allocation by markets or non-market institutions. That's where the interesting conversations are. Not sort of tweaking markets to sort of slowly wreck the planet, but actually throwing out markets where they don't work. Policies with or without prices, we could talk about that. Actors as Homo economicus or Homo sapiens. I honestly think the field of economics is way ahead of us here. The revolution that's happening with the marriage of economics with the behavioral sciences is really thinking the whole basis of the decision actor in economics. And ecological economists are basically playing a catch-up game at this point. So last slide. Economics for the Anthropocene. This is this project that we've ginned up between the University of Vermont, between McGill, and between New York University. We're impatient. We think it's time to change. We think, as academic institutions, we need to sort of bring in a whole new renaissance, a whole new age, a whole new wave of students that are going to go out and start the new programs, run the new companies, build the new economy. So we've built this partnership with a big fancy advisory board, a steering committee between the three universities, and a cohort of faculty, grad students, partners, and by partners I mean community partners, advocacy organizations, government agencies, collaborators, other scholars around the world, and community scholars, people who bring to the table knowledge that's not necessarily the credentialed knowledge, but expert knowledge nonetheless. It has a training and mentoring program. It's built around problem-based research. And it has some very hopeful, transformative outcomes. The training and mentoring program really comes from a foundation courses from a set of principles that emanate from ecological economics. It'll start with a shared online course between the three universities that we hope will then develop course materials for worldwide. That takes us from the Big Bang to the Anthropocene. A course in ecological economics that starts with these kinds of principles of building an economy from the outside in versus the inside out, and a survey of all the methods that our students can be using to ask these kinds of tough questions, which would result in an international learning network. This program is focused largely on doctoral students, but we're going to embed these students in government agencies, NGOs, community organizations. We want their research questions to be driven from the front lines, not from the ivory tower. Which will result in a whole series of participatory action projects. Graduate seminars, the students are going to be critiquing the orphans, right? They're going to be rebuilding the orphans, and they're going to throw the orphans out or find them new parents, one way or the other. We're going to help these orphans find a home. And this is going to really revolutionize not just economics, but all of the normative disciplines, right? All the normative disciplines. And economics is indeed a normative discipline. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And doctoral research. Doctoral research will really be the core of this. This is going to be a high-level, high-training kind of program that'll lead to a whole series of change agents throughout society. Over 5 years, we're going to train 60 doctoral students between the three universities to go out and basically catch up. We're behind. We should have done this 20 years ago. We're going to do this based on problem-based research. First cohort's going to come in and focus a lot on water, transboundary water issues between Canada and the US. The second cohort is going to focus on energy, and the third cohort is going to focus on climate justice. Okay, each of these cohorts led by one of the 3 universities. These are the big problems that define the Anthropocene. They're the really complex problems that these students need to get their hands dirty with our community partners, with our academic partners. And this will all lead to, you know, your synthesis papers, your symposiums, your conferences, but the right-hand column is the most important part, and that last piece in particular, really a renaissance, a new wave of change agents in society. So we've kind of informally launched this year with some shared online courses, and we'll be recruiting the first group of doctoral students into the program this fall. And if you're interested, you should talk to one of the 3 of us. Thank you.